calculators. Let's start with some general math functions on the T83, just to kind of review where things are on the calculator. Let's start with changing a number or a decimal to a fraction. So if I type in, let's just say I type in 0.5, and I want to convert that to a fraction. Then I would go ahead and hit the math key, and then hit the fraction number 1. You can either hit number 1 or hit enter, and that'll convert it to a fraction. So I hit enter and hit enter again, and it turns it into a fraction. Let's say I want to work with cubed functions or cube root functions or fifth root functions. Let's find where those would be. So let's say I want to take a number, let's say 6, and I want to cube it. You can either say to the third power, or you can do 6 math, and then you've got options here. Here's your cubed, here's your cubed root, here's your whatever x power we're talking about, which I'll show in just a minute. So I hit number 3, and does 6 cubed, and I hit enter. Gives me my answer. Let's say I want to do the cube root of 216. Well, then I would hit the math key, hit number 4, and it'll come up cube root of, and then you'd say 216, and hit enter, and the answer is 6. Let's say I want to do the fifth root of a number. Let's try doing the fifth root of 216. So this time I'm going to do 5 math and hit this X, and whatever number you put in front of this symbol will be whatever root you're talking about. So I'm going to do the fifth root, so I'm just going to hit number 5, fifth root of 216, and I hit enter, and it gives me 2.934, my answer. Under math, you will also find your absolute value information. So if I want to work with absolute value of -3, so I'm going to go to the right. This is math, but I want to go to the num. Working with numbers, ABS parentheses means absolute value. So I hit number 1. It says absolute value of, let's say, -9. Absolute value always makes the number positive. Now in some calculators it'll say ABS and then parentheses. You type in -9, close the parentheses, hit enter, and my answer is obviously 9 because the absolute value turns it to a positive number. The other thing to remember is that when you are typing in long equations, instead of retyping in equations, you can always do second, enter, and what you typed in last comes back up. If I hit second enter again, what I typed in before that comes up. If I hit second enter again, what I typed in before that comes up. So if I keep hitting second enter, I can go backwards to things I may have typed in before. It makes things a lot easier, especially if you're dealing with a long equation as opposed to having to deal with different numbers and trying to retype everything when you can go back and just change one thing. Now let's talk about probability and how to use the calculator for the probability functions on a T83 or 84. A couple of things we want to look at. There are NPR or permutations versus NCR, which are combinations, versus factorial. NPR is when order, or permutations are when order matters, and NCR is when order doesn't matter. The ironic part is when you go to your locker at school, we call it a combination lock because the order matters as to how you put in the numbers to open your locker. That shouldn't be a combination lock. That should actually be a permutation lock. That's how you can kind of remember that. It's opposite of what you would think. Permutations are when order matters. Let's do an example. We want to pick a president and a vice president of a company from 5 people that are interviewed. In this case, order will matter because my president will be my top person where my vice president will be my second top. And I only have 5 people that I interviewed. So I want to go through, I want to do 5, and then we're going to do math, and you can scroll right or just scroll right to the left, and there's your options. We'll hit number 2. And I want to choose 2. That means there are 20 different combinations of choosing 2 people for my president and my vice president of my company. Let's try a combination. How many different ways of sending 3 people out of 10 to a conference? Let's say I have 10 people that work for me and I want to send 3 to a conference. So this time it doesn't matter what the order is. I just want to send 3. So this time I'm going to do NCR, which is number 3. And I want to choose 3 people and I hit enter. There are 120 different combinations or different ways of coming up with sending 3 people to the conference. Then the other thing we should look at is just a plain factorial, which means if I take a number, for example, 5 factorial, it means 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. An example of this would be how many different ways can I arrange 5 trophies on a shelf? In this case, I would do 5, math, probability, number 4. And number 4 is the factorial. I hit enter. There are 120 different ways I can arrange 5 trophies on my shelf. Next, let's move on to trigonometry, functions on the T83 or the 84 using trigonometry. First thing you want to do is make sure your calculator is in degree mode. So I'm going to go over here to mode, and I'm going to go down and highlight degree. I hit enter. It highlights it and blackens it in. Now we're set to go. Now do second quit because it's in degree mode. The times you'd be using this, like sine, cosine, and tangent on my TI-83, is when we're trying to use SOHCAHTOA, which is sine is opposite over hypotenuse, the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and the tangent is the opposite over adjacent. It's always working with a right triangle. For example, I go through and I solve and I come up with the idea or the problem that the sine of 34 degrees is equal to x over 7. Well, to solve for what x is, whatever that other side is, I would multiply both sides by 7. Then I would go to my calculator and I would do 7 times the sine of 34 degrees, and I hit enter. You can close parentheses if you want, but if you're done, you just hit enter. And there's your answer. 3.91 units is how long that side is. What if we want to find an angle? Inverse sine is what we use to find the angle, and all the inverse are above. You got inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent. To get to these, you need to do second and then hit each one of these. Second sine, second cosine, or second tangent to get to the inverses. Inverse sine, let's give you an example. This time I have a right triangle and I have the two sides 3 over 4, but I need to solve for angle A. So basically what that means is I need to get rid of this sine. So angle A is equal to the sine inverse, that's how I bring it over, of the fraction 3/4. So on my calculator I would do second sine, gives me the sine inverse, 3 divided by 4, or you can just type in the 0.75 if you knew that. Close the parentheses, hit enter. That angle is going to be 48.59 degrees, basically is what's going to happen. Just make sure your calculator is in degree mode before you work with sine, cosine, tangents, or these keys right here. Next, let's move into graphing on the TI-83 or the 84. A lot of different options here for graphing. Let's clear this out. First thing I'm going to have you do is go to second y equals. Hit number 4. We're going to turn all the plots off. We'll come back to this, but we're going to hit the plots off. So second y equals, hit number 4. Plots off, just hit enter again. It says done. You're good to go. Now let's go to y equals. Clear out anything you have in any of these equations. Now you do want to make sure you go all the way down to y, 8, 9, and 0. Make sure there's nothing in there. Sometimes things get in there and messes everything up. Let's type in the equation. 3x squared plus 4x. Oops. Let me go back here. Not 44, but let's do 4x. Plus, or excuse me, minus 2. The equation I typed in is this one right here, y equals 3x squared plus 4x minus 2. It's just an example that I want to go through. Now what I would do right away is I would go ahead and graph it, see what it looks like. And I notice my graph is not in the 10 by 10 units that we're used to. So I'm going to go right away and do zoom standard. What that does is turns it into a scenario where we've got goes out to negative 10 up to positive 10 on the x-axis, and then the same, positive 10 on the y-axis and negative 10 on the y-axis as well. Now I can see, oh, we're dealing with a parabola. That works with it. Now let's say I do want to zoom in. I can hit the window key and I can change the x min. Let's change that to -5, and the max, x max, let's change that to 5. Let's just see what happens. And the x scale is, do you want to go increments of 1 or 0.5? Y min, y max are the y values, the minimum and the maximum that you want it to go up to. Now I hit graph, and you can see that it now goes down to -5 and up to +5. It gives me a chance to zoom in a little bit. I can also go to second window, table set. Where do I want my table to go? What do I need the table for? Well, let's look at this. Table, if I do second graph, it gives me the table part here. It gives me all my x and y coordinates for that parabola. And I can sit there and scroll up and down, but notice I'm sitting at 40, 39, 38, 37. You know what, I'd really like to start at 0 and see what happens. So this time I'm going to go to second window, or go to table set, which gives me that blue one right there. And I want to start at 0 and go increments, or delta, or the change in the table is equal to 1. I'm going to leave it as 1. Now go back to second table. It will not change your graph, but now you can see it starts at 0, and I can scroll up if I want or scroll down. But -1, -3 is a coordinate, 0, -2 is a coordinate, 1, 5 is a coordinate, 2, 18. I can see right between 0 and 1 here, something happened where we reached a minimum on our parabola, just to kind of give me an idea. But those gives me my x and y coordinates. Again, that would be under second table. If I want to find, if we go over here, find the y-intercept of a graph. So if I go back and look at the graph, the y-intercept is where the line intercepts or intersects the y-axis. I want to find this point right here. To find it, it could be a decimal. I don't know. So let's go through, and I'm going to do second trace, which gives me the calc. Second trace or calc, and I'm going to hit the value key, just number 1. And it'll come here in the corner and it'll say x equals, we want to say when x is 0. Then hit enter, and it moves the cursor and tells you that the intercept is at 0, -2. That would be my y-intercept. Let's say I want to find the x-intercepts. There are two, one here and one here on this calculator. This time I'm going to do second calc, but do 0. Hit number 2. For our x-intercepts, and it asks for left bound, and then it'll ask for right bound. I want to find the left, move my cursor to the left side of where this intercept is. This is the intercept I'm looking at. You can think about it in terms of a line. If I just drew a line straight down right here, I want to move my cursor to the left side of that. And there it is. So I hit left bound, yes. Anywhere in there, I just hit enter. Then it says right bound. I move the cursor to the right side of where that vertical line would be. If I drew a line straight down, now my cursor's to the right side of that. Right bound, I hit enter. Do you want the calculator to take a guess? You can see it's going to take a guess as to the intercept between these two little triangles. Yes, that's why I'm doing this. So I hit enter. Then it's going to tell me the x-intercept is at -1.72 when y is 0. If I want to find the other intercept, I have to go through the same thing. I just go to second calc, number 2, and I move my cursor to the left bound, which would be right in here, right bound, which would be right here, because you're looking at a vertical line coming down, and you want your left bound somewhere in one of these keys right here in this fourth quadrant. And then the right bound would be on this line right here. And that would give you the same thing. It would find this x-intercept for you. Now this graphing calculator, or this equation, 3x squared plus 4x minus 2, gives me a parabola which opens up. Let's say I want to find the minimum, because this is the minimum when it comes down to a low point, as opposed to opening up, which would be, opening down, which would be have a maximum. This one, the way I've typed it in, has a minimum, and I want to find what that is. I can just do second calc and find the minimum, which is number 3. So I hit number 3 or scroll down to number 3. Same thing. It asks left bound, so I'm going to just scroll right a little bit. That's if I draw a vertical line through the lower point, the vertex, I hit enter because it's to the left side of that. Right bound, so I need to move the cursor to the right side. Keep it in the same quadrant. We're in quadrant 3 here, so I'm just going to put it right there. There's my cursor. Right bound, I hit enter. It'll guess between those 2 points. I hit enter. My minimum is at negative 0.67 or negative 2/3 when my y value's at negative 3.33 repeating. That's my minimum point right here, my lowest point of my parabola. If I were to find the maximum, because my parabola was opening down, like a bowl flipped upside down, then I would do the second calc, and that would help me find the maximum. Just a couple shortcuts here under second calc to find value, which is your y-intercept, 0, which is your x-intercept, minimum, which is the low point, and maximum, which would be the high point. Now, let's move on